Namaskar. Welcome to the 10th episode of the Indian Ad Geek. My name is Vishal Mehra. This is a milestone episode, and boy, do we have a milestone lady for it. Today's episode is headlined by Landor's powerhouse president for APAC and managing director for India, Lulu Raghavan. Her almost 25-year odyssey across San Francisco, New York, London and Mumbai has seen her transform logos into legends. And in 2008, she planted Landor's flag in India, growing it into the nation's most revered brand and design consultancy. She is the force behind metamorphosis for Tata, Mahindra, Godrej and Aditya Birla Group, a Cannes Lion Design jury member, Campaign India Mentor of the Year, and a perennial fixture on Impact's top 50 women in media, marketing, and advertising lists. Without further ado, welcome to the Indian Ad Geek, Lulu.
Hi, Vishal. Fantastic to be here. Thanks for inviting me to be on your show.
It's a pleasure to host you. Let's start from the very beginning. How did you and your love for brands come about?
When I look back, I'm quite gobsmacked that I have a career in branding and design. I studied science in high school, did econ and math undergrad, and was all set to be an investment banker or a management consultant. But I moved back to India, Vishal, and at that time, I didn't realize that just having an undergraduate degree was was basically having only an undergrad degree was not enough. And I needed to have an MBA because there were so many MBAs floating around for these consultants and bankers. And I wasn't yet ready for my MBA. So I was wondering, oh, what am I going to do now? And a chance meeting with an advertising professional by the name of Shumit Roy actually changed my career and my life. He introduced me to the fantastic world of brand consulting. I got an interview with R. Sridhar at Ogilvy, and there it was. I was 21 years old, starting out in the world of work and completely besotted by the ad agency. It was Ogilvy. It was at the height of Ogilvy's success. Piyush Pandey, Sonal Dabral, all of these icons were just so close by to me, and I was absorbing everything and falling in love with communication and branding. That's how it started. I actually did go on to get my MBA after that, and then I moved to the US, and there somebody introduced me to the advertising firm, which happened to be a design agency actually for lots of people. It's all of the same thing. And I started out at Landor in San Francisco, and the whole world of design opened up. To be honest, I felt like a bit of an imposter in the beginning. Here I was, this MBA with lots of languages, and I'd gotten a job in naming because of my language background and Ogilvy background. But the whole world of design opened up, and that's when I decided, and you'll like this because it's the focus of your podcast, to be an expert in the business of design. I'm not a designer, and so what right did I have to be there? So that's my sort of meandering path and how I ended up at Landor, which is one of the world's biggest and most prestigious branding and consulting agencies.
Wow, I think you're completing 25 years next year. You've journeyed with Landor across San Francisco, New York, London, and Mumbai. What's been the most defining moment in your career, Lulu, that shaped how you think about brands today?
When I moved back to India in end 2007, 2008, I had to set up Landor from scratch. That's when my knowledge of branding and my skills as a professional were really tested. It was an entrepreneurial journey, albeit under the umbrage of Landor and WPP, but going out there, evangelizing branding, helping Indian businesses understand the value of brand beyond just logos and labels, constantly talking about case studies from around the world, hiring talent to establish the operations, winning business, growing those clients, doing all of that truly was the defining stage. I think I could have kept bumbling along in the organization elsewhere in the world. But coming back to India and having the incredible opportunity to set up Landor India brought out so many skills that I didn't think I had and shaped me to be quite holistic, but also a passionate evangelist for branding. In the UK or in the US, the need for that role might not have been there because branding is well understood. But the fact that I came back, the fact that I was doing branding in India, this whole purpose of mine opened up, which is to help organizations understand truly the power that brand could have on their businesses, the power of brand as a business asset, one that had financial value that could be nurtured and grown to create impact and monetary value for the organization. That was definitely the defining role of my career so far, to have set up Landor India and then really to have scaled it.
You essentially built Landor India from scratch. I'm wondering what the biggest challenges were in establishing a global brand consultancy in the Indian market, and how did you overcome them?
Number one, Landor was seen as a design agency. While design has so much value, in those days, in the Indian context, design meant logos. And while some clients saw it as quite important, it was a very, very limited way of thinking about the value of brand. Ad agencies as well didn't quite understand that we were strategic, that we offered so much more than just logos. So, truly establishing the value that we could bring both to clients and the agency ecosystem was a huge challenge. Once you got past that, establishing the credibility of Landor. Who is Landor? What has Landor done? What kind of value has Landor created for others around the world? What have you done in India? Who's the team that's going to be on my account? So, a lot of the early years, Vishal, was establishing credibility. Now, once you establish credibility and clients are open and they say, wow, I do think you can act, you can provide some value, then it's the question of at what cost. And we are a high-end premium brand consultancy, a global one, bringing lots of value to clients. And so it's high-end B2B sales, which is not easy because you've got to convince clients of the value. That was another challenge. Then I would say actually working the projects. There's a certain scope. In India, the scope goes out of the window. In the US and UK, projects are managed very much to scope. If you write 3 rounds of refinements, it's 3 rounds of refinements. If it goes over, then there's a additional. You have to manage Indian clients very, very differently. You have to have a lot of patience. Also, many were doing branding for the first time. So, without being too pedantic about it, you had to, in many ways, hold hands and bring people along. You had to have that patience, also resilience, because things would keep changing. And it was very easy to get frustrated. So, you had to truly be in it for the long run. And I would say be quite open to feedback because our clients here don't hold back, whether it's, hey Lulu, maza nahi aaya, or really, scathing comments on the work. I had to, in those early days, learn to distance myself from the work because it was very easy to mix the two. And therefore, every day, which was a high stakes day for me because there was always a big client presentation, it was very easy to get personally offended by the work. And then, of course, as the organization started to grow, It was having a vision, leading people who had joined Landor, so had this larger responsibility, growing the organization, growing people. Suddenly now you're in charge of other people's careers. And so, but it was all fun. That's what makes work so interesting. But I've had, an amazing time every single day. Nothing that I would regret, so to speak.
Can I request you to dissect one standout Landor project from brief to launch? Any one of your favorites?
One of my favorites is the Delhi T3 airport branding and interior design. We partnered with Amit Gulati and Incubus consultants in Delhi. Amit and I, with our teams, pitched this project together. And Vishal, it was so special because the brief was so crisp. It was from Mr. GM Rao himself, because GMR owns the airport. This was in 2008 when we were briefed. And he said, unlike Beijing Airport, where the architecture and all of the interiors go hand in hand, in Delhi, we've already built the structure. It's all glass and steel. And now, my brief to you guys is to infuse soul into this glass and steel. How do you make it distinctly India, distinctly Delhi, and distinctly GMR? Such a beautiful brief. And I love it because it was a challenge unlike any we had ever taken. It's not just a company, right? It's this massive, hundreds of thousands of square foot space. So, how you think about the branding of the interiors was quite challenging. So, it started with the customer journey mapping, where we were thinking about the guest's journey through the airport, the role that the airport plays, and the many interventions that we would have to create this distinctly India, distinctly Delhi, distinctly GMR feeling. Because, when we looked at airports around the world, some of them were completely soulless. And if you didn't know where you were, you couldn't tell because there's no sense of provenance. I'm very proud to say that our branding of T3 set the precedent for all of the airports in India after that in terms of the art, the culture, the sense of place they created that travelers don't just want to quickly get through the airport, but actually spend some time there. So after that brief, we had a lot of debate on what kind of India we wanted to represent. It was really interesting because the non-Indians wanted a far more deeper take on the culture of India, ancient India, etc. The young people in the room wanted much more of a contemporary India, right? A modern representation of India. At the end of it, we decided to go with expressive India. And if you look at the GMR logo, it's made up of these triangles. So we extrapolated that and said, how can this be born into different forms of expression? So whether that's art or architecture or dance. So you'll see all the graphics in T3, and now I think even in T1 and T2, the graphic language was born. That was the beginning of the visual identity system. And then we actually had to think about the spatial interventions, which you'll see the mudra wall, it's called the Grand Canyon. I'll still remember the presentations in which we showcase the concepts and how our clients bought into it, and then the mother and baby elephant. And the most exciting was to write the brief and actually commission Paresh Maiti to create reams and reams of art near the travelators, etc. Right? So just thinking about it, it was so multidimensional. It was the first project of its kind in the Landor network anywhere. It was really new to India. When the airport was launched, we were there for the launch, and former Prime Minister, the late Manmohan Singh, in his speech, actually thanked all the artists, the artisans, the professionals who worked on the branding of T3. So for me, it was a much larger than life project. But I also love it because it was such a clear brief, and I'd like to think that we delivered on the brief, and it's something that's so enduring.
That's very interesting because a large part of the Indian Av Geeks episode last week was around Delhi Airport. Though I must admit, the discussion wasn't very flattering, considering it has been a while since T3's aesthetics were given a go. Nonetheless, coming back to our discussion at hand, how do you measure the ROI of a design led brand work in terms that resonate with business stakeholders? Do you have a process for it?
Well, firstly, there's a lot of data. We invented a tool in the 1980s called Brand Asset Valuator, BAV, which is the most comprehensive study on the perceptions of brands by consumers around the world. WPP, that owns Landor, runs BAV all around the world now. And across 2 decades, BAV data has shown that strong brands beat the index. So when you look at the performance of the most branded companies and their performance vis-a-vis the S&P 500 or the MSCI index, you'll see a very strong correlation. And in fact, the strong brands index is significantly more. And what's really interesting is whether it was 2008 when the Lehman crash happened or COVID, when the index dips, strong brands also dip, but they don't dip as much. And when growth comes back, the strong brands index grows that much faster. So you can see the value of brand. The Design Institute in the UK also did a longitudinal study and showed that design-led companies beat the index by 211%. McKinsey also has an index. So the point being, Vishal, there are a lot of studies that have shown the value of brand. The best way to showcase it is other companies that have either undergone a brand architecture or some packaging redesign. Website, of course, the metrics are there, very easy in a website refresh to see whether it's worked or not. Corporate branding is a lot harder because there are just so many elements, but I think it's a combination of general case studies on the value of brand and design, specific case studies, and at the end of the day, it's one of those things that you can't keep proving. There has to be a leap of faith in many ways that branding works, right? And a lot of CEOs do have that because they see how strong brands are able to command premiums, which are not fully explainable by logic alone. And then when you unpack what enables a brand, let's say like an Apple, to create that, to command that premium, then you talk about design, you talk about product innovation, you talk about customer experience, and all of those are elements of branding. So it's a combination of these things where our clients start to see how the image of a brand can be managed to drive business value. There are lots of ways in which clients immediately see how the way in which a brand is perceived, if it's differentiated or relevant, how that creates a strong image and how that image then either leads to reconsideration of the brand or um, continued satisfaction, all of which is linked to hard metrics.
You have driven over $15 million in new business wins across APAC in the past year. You've enacted the one APAC model across all the markets that you manage. I want to know what's your business development strategy and how do you identify and pursue the right opportunities in such diverse marketplaces?
So we have India, China, Japan, Hong Kong, Australia, and then Southeast Asia based in Singapore, but we work in markets like Thailand, Cambodia, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, right? So it's a combination of inbound and outbound. Inbound is the strength of our reputation or Google search. Either clients who are looking for branding solutions know of Landor and we're in the consideration set, or somebody goes in Google. So that is taken care of by continuing to invest in reputation building. And then there's the whole process. And so we have a very, very efficient response to inbound. We have 5 MDs across all our APAC markets, and the MDs have strong teams locally. And we have a very well-proven process of lead qualification, having that first meeting with the clients to understand and appreciate the brief, putting it together a pitch response, a very, very professional proposal, understanding of scope and value, and making sure that the elements that truly set us apart or our win strategy are evident in the pitch. So that's the whole inbound mechanism. When it comes to outbound, we have a very clear profile of the kind of clients Landor should be working with. It's those billion-dollar companies in every APAC market of the world, right? As a premier global brand consultancy, we're most relevant for those large organizations that are already leaders and therefore have to continue to invent the next thing and stay ahead of the curve. Or it could be large companies that may have been disrupted in their industry, they may have lost the way, their brand may have not become so relevant, and it's helping them regain leadership. So it's a very clear profile. We call it the client prioritization matrix, which we introduced as we were bringing the teams together as one APAC. And so in each of the markets, we have targeted outbound to these kinds of companies in particular industries. And then we follow that up with industry specific events and thought leadership, essentially being out there and being as visible as we possibly can. But even being as big as we are, you'll be amazed as how much more work we have to do, even in the marketing branding ecosystem. But today, I firmly believe that our decision makers are way beyond just the CMOs. Just as in the IT world, it's no longer CIOs who are buying IT. In the branding world as well, it's the business leaders everywhere who have to understand the value of branding. It's not just the CMOs. So, to summarize, new business wins are a combination of inbound and outbound. We have quite an efficient inbound machine. We need to build our outbound muscle a lot more to continue scaling and growing.
So, when you pitch Landor to a prospective client, which three business outcomes do you lead with and why?
A clear understanding of the brand, what the brand stands for, right? Is the organization able to say that in a few words on a page, they can articulate how they are uniquely different, what their X factor is, and does the entire leadership team and quite frankly, the entire organization understand it? Because there's a lot of value in that singularity around your value proposition and difference. That then gets translated through the visual, verbal language, etc., through all the signaling into a strong image. So a lot of our clients track their brand on the four most important pillars of differentiation, relevance, esteem, and knowledge, which are the pillars of brand health and brand strength. And then there's a whole battery of attributes: innovative, progressive, dynamic, friendly, etc. So you can clearly see how the brand image is tracking over time. So imagery attributes would be the second. And then the third, I would say that, comprehensive branding programs have to have an impact on some engagement internally. So whether it's an engagement score or, ENPS, depending on how much the brand is integrated into the organization, and some sort of score externally. So some sort of CX metric, which could be a net promoter score or some sort of customer experience quantifiable metric. Oh, every organization would like to track things differently. At the end of the day, it just comes back to many times a qualitative difference on how the brand is perceived. But these are the things that we would certainly talk about in a pitch because you can set up the measurement systems to drive these. Ultimately, the health of the brand is linked to its financial success. I would say the most important factors to keep your eye on are differentiation and relevance.
Lulu, during my research for our chat, I came across a piece where you had mentioned that Rose Herseg from WPP Australia inspired your new pitching methodology. You mentioned how she turned a no budget client into a $500,000 client in 48 hours. What's your most memorable legendary hustle moment? And what did it teach you about client psychology?
That's a really cool question. I've been pitch doctor lately because I'm not, a lot of times the MDs and the markets are pitching. Um, but yeah, I think it goes back to just getting the CEO or the leadership team that you're pitching to truly excited about the transformative power that brand can have on their business. And, giving them that confidence of the expertise that you bring to the table, also the comfort that you are actually going to get them there. So that's the broader feeling I try to achieve with the teams and myself during meetings. I remember one particular instance, many, many years ago when the first big corporate branding project for Mahindra was being pitched. It was six agencies,
This is,
and
by the way, Rise.
it was actually before that.
Oh,
It was
okay.
the brand architecture. It was also
Right.
around 2008, 2009. So it's a
All
little
right.
bit of an old story, but it's an interesting one because I do think for me it was a legendary hustle moment where B. Karthik was running the process, and I was still me establishing Landor India. And he, being this very earnest head of brand, was literally quizzing me on everything related to brand. And it was almost like it was harder than the CAT exam kind of interrogation that I had to go through, but it was rapid fire and it was like, very, very pointed. And at the end of it, I was like, oh my God, that was an exam. Did I pass it or not? And then eventually, when we got selected and we did the whole win report and we realized we beat, five other agencies, it was less of a hustle, but it was just such a memorable pitch because nobody since then ever has gone so deep in such a short period of time, truly testing your mettle as a branding professional that I had to share it with you because, we ended up being successful and victorious. And that started a very long relationship with the Mahindra Group.
And what did it teach you about client psychology, Lulu?
Yeah, you did ask me that question. Sorry, I forgot to answer that part of it. It goes back to what I said about clients looking for that combination of credibility, expertise, and also comfort. I don't think comfort alone is enough because there's some people you might have an easy rapport with, but if they're really doing right for their company or their business, they should be asking what's the value you're bringing to the table. On the other hand, if it's only you could be incredibly smart and incredibly competent, but if they don't find that comfort that, no matter what it takes, you're going to get them there, they may not go with you. So it's that sweet spot or the combination of the two. I can say, I can sum that up by saying it's the credibility plus the charisma. Because the charisma around the warmth gives them that comfort that, hey, you know what? You will make this happen for them in their organization, and you're going to be that North Star that pulls everything together.
Well, here I am, paging the pitch doctor again to walk us through your framework for a perfect pitch.
Oh God, Vishal, you make it sound like I know everything, but no. Um, I don't have a, handy nifty framework to share with you, but I just went through one yesterday. We were pitching to a large bank in Thailand, and I was with the team just going over stuff. So some of the questions I ask, of course, assuming that the lead has been qualified and stuff, who's the decision maker? Are they actually going to be in the room, or are we speaking to somebody else? Important to know who it is, right? Most important for me, what's the feeling that we want to leave them with at the end of this meeting? What will they remember about Landor? There's Landor, there's Interbrand, there's Future Brand, there's Siegel and Gale, Wolf Ollins, there's, Chlorophyll, Alok Nanda, hundreds of agencies. When they sit down at the end of the day or 3 days later, and can they remember one agency from the other? What would have been so memorable? Either the content or how we showed up or how we made them feel. What are we doing to create that memorability? Then we'll get into the actual content. Is it short and sharp? Something else I learned from Rose. Are we talking more about them and less about ourselves? Usually it's the other way around. How are we exciting them about the transformation? Because it's usually transformation. We show understanding of where they are, but the potential to transform, unlike the agencies, we don't actually give the solution, but yet we need to excite and say, here's how we're excited about where your brand can go. And then are we also being thorough in terms of the process? Because branding is a process, right? It's branding and design. A lot of the success of the program is on how well the process is structured, much as we don't like that word. So are we being clear? Are we being simple? And are we inspiring? At the end of the day, is it energizing? Are we bringing energy into the room? Are we truly putting ourselves? And then what is the homework have we done? Have we gone out? Have we experienced the brand in the consumer shoes? Have we spoken to other people? What is the fresh thinking that we're bringing to the table? For me, it's a lot about the memorability and the emotional quality of the pitch. It's not the big idea alone, because for us, it's never the big idea.
Absolutely. In fact, if I can add an anecdote, sometime back we were pitching to an aviation client, a big aviation client. And this was the same question we were asking ourselves: how do we make the client remember us long after we are gone from that pitch conference room? So, what we did, we went to them with a black box, a physically made black box, which had physical copies of our related case studies inside it.
Oh,
It was designed to be a leave behind at the client, and worked quite well.
that's very cool.
How do you handle situations where you're competing on price versus value, especially in markets where procurement teams focus heavily on cost optimization?
Yeah, discovered too late in the day. Should have discovered it, um, a long time ago. Empathy is really important. What is the procurement guys? What are they trying to do? How can we get into their shoes? How do we understand all the important bits of information? How much is actually the budget without asking them directly? How do we create emotional rapport with them? How do we understand for that particular organization, is it really budget or is there a stakeholder who's on a deadline? Is there something else? So extracting all the pieces of information on what could influence this negotiation, so to speak, I think is very critical. I never looked at it that way. I always used to think of it as just they want to lower the price. I want to make sure we don't lose it. And it's sort of a zero-sum game in that sense, right? But now, for me, It's very different. I'm excited to meet purchasing people. I want to get to know them a little bit. And those who been in the game for a while, they understand that, right? So it's more of a initially relationship building because they say, we want to do business with you in the long term. It's trying to figure out all of the factors. It's making the users be part of the process if possible, because usually the user, the marketing organization or the CEO's team who really wants us and brings value to the table, and purchasing tries to cut them out, right? It's also saying, listen, let's not just talk about price. We've spent a lot of time taking your colleagues through our pitch process. I'm happy to walk you through the pitch process and identify specifically the value that Landor brings that others may not have. This is not buying widgets. It's intangible, it's abstract in many ways, and the value of strategy is not understood. So let me walk you through it. Let me walk you through the benefits of the organization and have questions, etc. So I'm trying to remember the name of the book as we speak. Maybe I'll send it to you after and you can add it in the link to your podcast. It's a book on negotiation that I read 4 years ago, which completely blew my mind. Of how do you get into the other person's head? Because a lot of times in negotiation, we're so in our heads. We're not listening, we're not seeing the signals, we're not understanding overall what's happening, right? Whether physically or even virtually, if you're negotiating. And these tips that I learned of actually just listening and understanding where they're coming from, what factors are driving them, truly allowed me to create more rapport and therefore end up at a better end result for us. And sometimes it's just walking away. I've learned that, Vishal. In India, no is very powerful. And when you say no, suddenly things open up, right? If we're scared of saying no because we have our monthly numbers and all of that to fill as well. And, you want to say yes to your clients. And I'm the first one to admit I've said yes way too often, right? Haven't been as protective of the price as I should have because your sales um, sort of KPIs kick in. It's a fine balance, but I think one has to be really firm about the value that we bring because it is not something that's easy to sell.
Have you used any storytelling techniques to make your pitches more memorable? Anything that
Purchasing
you
or
can?
in general?
No, in general, when you're pitching to
Yeah.
a client.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I have to say, not everybody in my organization agrees on this, but I do like our origin story. Walter Landor, setting up Landor, it's just so seductive. People are just taken up when I'm telling the story of how Landor was formed, his pioneering vision, and how we've taken that forward. So, a little bit of that is very helpful to create that emotional connect. In the arc of the pitch itself, yeah, I think one that works a lot is recognizing how far the brand or the company has come and all the things that are going right, right? Yet, the challenge of today that's there and what that means for the future. So, that inflection point, so the dramatization of the inflection point, the challenges and what happens if those challenges are not addressed, very crisply stated. And then a little bit of a direction towards the denouement, which doesn't happen. Like I was saying, it's not like we give away the answer, but at least a path of, what we'll do or how we'll go down this path to solve the problems. And some energizing examples of how others have done it so that you feel like, hey, lots of other people have solved this challenge and we can as well. And they got great results, so we should as well. So that's quite a straightforward one, which I feel works 80-90% of the time. And it's immediately getting into the client, just you'll be amazed, Vishal. I've realized how many of us agencies don't spend enough time on the client and understanding them and their issues, really feeling the empathy for their problem that they've come to us with. I think we jump directly into here's how fantastic we are and how well equipped we are to solve your problem rather than actually saying, hey, you have a fever. Tell me more. How long have you had it? When did it develop? Are you feeling anything else? What else is going on in your body? Right? How is this making you feel? Have you had it before? Just spending more time on the problem, empathizing that I get it, how bad you're feeling because you have a fever, how weak you might be feeling, how sad you are that you can't go out. And then kind of saying, you know what? I know how to deal with this fever. I've I've cured the fever for five other types of people in different instances, but in each instance they got cured and this is what happened, for example, right? I think spending more time on storytelling like that, really empathizing, showcasing how we might have solved it elsewhere, but always having a close connect, I think is very powerful. If you tell the case studies well, in a way that's contextualized to the client's challenge, I feel those are really engaging and captivating because people see a little bit of themselves in those other stories.
If I could go back for a second, you feel empathizing with the procurement team in their situation is most important, right? And sometimes even taking them through what you have presented to the marketing team. In a way, telling them you are no less than the CMO to me, and right?
Exactly, exactly.
So let
Yeah,
me
that's a
take you
nice way to
through.
put it. Yeah.
Here's what we pitch to them, treating them as equals, right? That's what you're saying?
I
Correct.
either presenting the credentials of the organization or taking them through the pitch itself and showcasing to them because for them they don't know XYZ consultants, right? They're just seeing this fat price and they're trying to say, how do I get 30% off?
Christian Schroeder mentioned that India is among Landor's top three markets by size, but lags in revenue. What's your strategy to bridge this gap and unlock India's revenue potential, especially considering we have so many interesting startups, Indian businesses that want to go global, and global businesses that want to enter India, especially in this era of FTAs?
We have three very clear segments. The global companies who want to win in India. These are the multinationals, the P&Gs, the Nestle's, the Coca-Colas of the world. And so they're looking for branding and design partners in India so that their brands can be strong, differentiated, and winning the hearts and minds of consumers. That's the first segment. The second segment are the Indian companies who want to win globally. It's the opposite path, right? So these are the IT companies, a whole number of companies in manufacturing, etc.,
Even
B2B.
Mahindra that you were talking about.
Correct, Mahindra as well, right? So a lot of other conglomerates who, once they step out of India, they realize that a lot of the Western companies have this irrational edge because of their brand image, because of the strength of their brands, right? I mean, if you take IT, I think lots of IT companies have trying to figure out why is Accenture so much leaps and beyond everyone else, right? When it comes to consideration. Sure, they have a hell of a lot of substance in terms of what they offer, the capabilities and the expertise. But the branding of Accenture is so superior and the image is so strong that it's able to command a premium. So the second segment, Indian companies going global who have to get their A game on when it comes to branding and design. And then the third segment that we're focused on are Indian companies who want to win in the Indian market, right? So local brands that are facing intensified competition and they look at branding and design as another lever to create competitive advantage. So for Landor's business in India to scale, it's having teams focused on the separate mindsets of these types of clients, what it takes to serve them really well and continue to grow with them and doubling down on that. One statistic, for example, in that second category of Indian companies going global, there are more than $300 billion companies in India, a lot of whom have extensive global footprints and organizations. So there's a lot of opportunity to be unlocked, Vishal, even if I don't look at SMEs and startups. I think there's a lot of work to be done, even with the largest organizations, because going back to what I said at the start, it's not just logos and labels. Brand has to be unlocked in so many ways that, every organization ideally should be thinking about interventions on branding and design all the time, not as a, one event that happens once in 5 years or 7 years. Like even going back to your Delhi T3 airport. Yes, if you don't do anything for 25, 15 years, it's suddenly going to look old and completely outdated, right? How do you keep refreshing? How do you ensure that the brand remains relevant and fresh throughout? So, huge opportunity to unlock. I'm very happy that CMOs and CEOs in India, by and large, get the difference between branding and design versus advertising. Now, of course, the budgets have to stretch, not just budgets for agencies like ours, but even within their own organizations, committing money to actually strengthening brand. That hasn't happened as yet, but that's a journey and I'm sure it will happen.
And when you're not successful in some pitches, what's your process for conducting postmortems? How do you gather honest feedback from clients about why they chose someone else? Do you have a process for that?
Yeah, we do have win reports and loss reports where it's a quantitative survey with some open-ended that clients fill out. Many years ago, we had a very competitive pitch to Air India for the Air India rebrand. And it was down to two agencies, us and Future Brand, and eventually we lost. And I was so, so, so upset at that time because from 15 down to two, and we lost it. And they said everything was fine. I wasn't able to get any real response. And I did the loss report. Even that, we scored really well. But then I actually got an answer later on. I think it comes down to having a rapport with the decision makers or somebody in the room and connecting with them informally. And you don't get it immediately. You may get it 3 months later or 6 months later. I don't think in India clients are very good about saying, in fact, a lot of them just ghost us, which is the worst. We write proposals, we do pitches, and we just don't get a response. And I think that's hugely irresponsible and highly unprofessional. And I get really upset when clients do that. You should just have the guts to say, we didn't choose you, and here's why. But that doesn't happen as often. But if you've developed a relationship,
Sorry, so many times there's pitch shopping as well. They just call for a pitch and eventually there's no result for anybody. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No,
that's
for
fine.
sure, for sure. So yeah, so back to that Air India when I spoke to one of the guys, he told me, listen, you guys were great, but on the day, the other team was just better in the room. It was marginal. Now, is that the truth? Who knows? But that's what I got, right? So I don't think you'll always know what the real reason was. But I think you should do postmortems. You should do postmortems after winning as well as losing so that you can repeat the things that you did well and make sure that some of the things that tripped you up, we might have seen some things that even the clients may not have picked up on, but it's important to do that and keep chatting with clients. How did that go? What landed? What didn't land? Yeah, the best client servicing people do that. And they're able to eke out some of that information, which is valuable later on. Even though we're highly priced and premium, it's not always priced. It's very easy to blame price. Some of my former CEOs never allowed us to say, well, we lost because of price. They just never accepted that as an answer. It said you guys didn't, you know, succeed in convincing the client of the value that you're bringing. Maybe the pitch wasn't strong enough, you didn't choose the right cases, you didn't have the right people in the room. So, yeah, I don't like to think it's price also.
In our aisle of the business, the advertising side, we're seeing increased competition from the big four. Those guys also have direct access to the C suite much more often than we do. Similarly, for brand and design consulting firms, there's increased competition from local consultancies and tech driven design firms. How does Landor differentiate its business development strategy? And I mean, is there something that you try and tell your associates to communicate to your clients, to your prospects?
I mean, I'd like to think we're in the McKinsey category because we're dealing with the C-suite. Most of our presentations and relationships are there. It might start with somebody junior who has done the research, but ultimately, all our projects, we work with senior people and chairmen, whether it's Tata, Mahindra, Aditya Birla, or any other organization that we work with. These are high stakes projects, right? So, in that sense, our BD strategy is we need to have people in the room who can speak the language of branding and design, but also the language of business and connect with the C-suite. That's one for sure. Um, I would say beyond the pitch itself, which we have talked about, I think the process that we deploy and the thorough professionalism that we bring to the table does stand us apart. I think in other markets in the world, Vishal, professionalism per se may not stand us apart, but I believe in India it's quite a differentiating factor. In delivering what you promise, being on time, having a high quality to all of the strategic and creative deliverables, getting through the process, being able to navigate that change and transformation for our clients. So it is a very management consulting like engagement with Landor, and that's what sets us apart with the high level of creativity on the design deliverables. It's a combination of rigor and creativity.
And staying on rigor and creativity, you often talk about brand transformation as an inside out journey, right? Can you break down this methodology and how it differs from traditional brand consulting approaches?
I wouldn't say it's different, but it's a reminder that the brand has to be socialized internally before it's launched externally, especially when it comes to corporate branding. In the past, organizations would take out a full page ad in the Economic Times in India or the Wall Street Journal globally, New York Times, and very often, even internally, half the people wouldn't know that the brand was changing. Now, that's a recipe for disaster in today's day and age. Your internal stakeholders must understand the reason for change, what the change is. They must buy into it because they're the ones very often delivering it, even if they're not fully front facing. So, that internal alignment around the new brand is critical before the brand is launched externally. And very often, the focus is on external. And therefore, when we suggest an inside out, internal first, external next process, it's not always well received because it's quite different. But then we talk about the importance of the culture change, the alignment of internal stakeholders. So I wouldn't say it's hugely different, but it's best practice. And those branding consultants who want to create enduring value will always advise on spending time on the brand internally first before launching it externally.
Lulu, which emerging consumer trend or trends in APAC are most exciting to you? And how are you helping brands capitalize on them? If you could talk about that briefly.
Ooh, there are lots of things which I'm sure you read about when you read about consumer insights and marketing all over the world. But I would say one thing that's a direct impact of this always on digital world and social media world that we live in is the few seconds in which brands have to make an impression. It's that vibe that a brand does, right? It's no longer the logo on a particular place on the page. It's kind of the feeling that the brand leaves you with. And with performance marketing picking up so much, your brand has just a few seconds to make that impression. So I think what's exciting and what the challenge is how do you get into the consumer's mind quickly within a matter of seconds and stay there? And that's where the sacred assets of the brand become quite critical. Of course, we've always talked about visual assets of the brand. When you close your eyes, what's the inventory of your brand in the consumer's mind, right? What do they recall most vividly? How are you using that to continue to stay top of mind? But then in this multisensorial medium that we operate in, how does your brand be multisensorial as well? Sonic branding is something that's picking up hugely these days because I think there's a statistic and research which shows that it's 86% more effective to create emotional resonance in consumers' minds. So I think that's very exciting. I would say, just very quickly giving consumers a sense of the brand personality, the feeling of the brand in this very fast moving, agile world. Then, of course, there's experiential. Brands as experiences is something that everyone's looking at. So whether it's in a pop-up or in a retail store, something immersive, physically or digitally, brand as an experience is something that's only gaining more and more traction with a lot of digital touch points as well. And then I think innovation is important again. It is on the agenda because everyone has to drive growth. Where's growth going to come from? And we believe in brand-led growth. And so we're looking at innovation agendas with all our clients across APAC.
And I remember reading somewhere your belief in iconic assets, which can be visual, verbal, or sonic, how those are essential for future ready brands. I remember that. Moving on, I wanted to ask you your opinion on AI. Do you think it's a friend or a foe? And how is Landor integrating AI and data analytics into its creative process without losing the human touch of storytelling?
Oh, hugely. Firstly, AI is absolutely a friend, an ally, an enhancer of possibilities, as well as an optimizer of cost, but more emphasis on the enhancer of possibilities, right? Landor is part of WPP. We have spent more than $300 million on WPP Open. I have it on my phone here. It's the one that I access the most, right? I have it on my laptop. It is ubiquitous for us. We have all of the platforms that we can access on Open, and we have embedded AI in our strategic processes, in our creative processes, in our governance processes, brand governance processes, as well as our production processes. I think it is moving at the speed of light. It's hugely exciting. I'm very proud of how well our teams have embraced it, adopted it, and truly enhancing the quality of the thinking strategically and creatively using AI. So, huge proponents and fans. In our plans for next year, each of the markets have come up with very innovative ways in which we will get financial benefits from all of this investments, right? Ultimately, this makes our work better, but how is it also going to create more value for our clients? So yeah, huge fan of it. I think it'll play a larger and larger role. We have agents for everything, even for our pitches. One thing I didn't talk about when I was talking about pitch frameworks, which I told the team yesterday as well, make sure that you fed the RFP and the response into our AI agent, and based on the Landor criteria, they come back to you with a response. We then also put in the decision makers and their LinkedIn profiles, and we have a response as to how these decision makers would respond to the pitch based on the brief. I mean, the use cases of AI is tremendous in simple ways, but creating unexpected value. And, it makes you think. It's a think partner. You can't just make it do your stuff, but it enhances your thinking. It offers a different perspective. It allows you to explore the options. It shortens things down. It allows you to catch up on stuff that you've missed. If you're not a great writer, um, though I'm a huge believer in writing as a meta skill, it helps you. though it sounds a bit cliched and now everybody can tell it's AI writing. But for people who are not great at it and not for copy and stuff, but I mean like in daily communication and things like that, it's fantastic. So yes, huge fan, Vishal.
From your vantage point, what will define winning brands in India over the next decade?
It just goes back to that emotional quality. I hope we can, you know, I wish, or let me say, I wish we can create a measure of the emotional quality of brands. I think in a world that's going to be increasingly competitive, very, very cluttered, brands that are emotionally resonant beyond differentiation and relevance and esteem and knowledge will create growth. And where does that emotional resonance come from? It comes from actually having a very clear reason to exist. Do we need another airline in this world? Do we need another toothpaste in a category of 150 toothpaste? Why does the brand exist? What is its unique value proposition that's adding value to the consumer's life? Vishal, I'm sorry to say, but not enough brands are focused on truly being meaningful to consumers and therefore creating that emotional resonance. For me, it goes back to that. That's how brands can win by carving out a distinct reason to exist, to continuously innovate, where you're like, wow, here's this hygiene brand, let's say a female hygiene brand, but they've thought of all of my problems. They know exactly what I'm going through. You know what? They constantly surprise me by solving this problem and that problem and this problem. And, there's this continuous innovation pipeline. It makes me stick with them.
But I wonder if we need emotions or purpose for every brand out there.
100%.
All
100%.
brands.
I would say emotional, yes. And now when you're saying purpose, I'm not talking about purpose in the, sort of brand purpose kind of way. I'm talking about it as why does the brand need to exist? What is the value it's serving in the world? Let's just say you have juices. You're the 150 juices and you're the 151st juice. Why are you starting a business of juices? We're talking about brands. The purpose of a brand is to make money. How are you going to make money if you're not differentiated, right? And therefore you have to have that unique reason to be and to be differentiated. I mean, what do you think the VCs look for? I mean, if you go back to the VC world or the startup world, they're looking for a unique reason for you to be. What problem are you solving that nobody else has solved? In what way? And yes, I go back to emotional resonance. By the way, Bain, reputed management consulting firm, has done a very in-depth study across B2B and B2C of the drivers of value. And emotional qualities are a component, many components of the 32 different drivers of value. And they have studies which show that the brands that have functional, rational, and aspirational value, the combination of those different drivers of value are the ones that truly succeed in the long run. So, yes, I'm 100% clear. Even in B2B, there is an emotion. We are irrational. We're human beings. We're not robots. No matter how logical you try to make a purchase out to be, it's an emotion. That's why luxury brands exist. That's why, people pay a lot more in certain situations because it's emotions that are ruling. That's why, we in the business of branding have a reason to exist because we're helping winning brands create that irrationality. It's business.
And that's the perfect segue to my next question on consumer behavior. If you could predict one seismic shift in consumer behavior that every marketer should prepare for, what would what would it be?
One thing I would say consumers are caring less and less. How do you get them to care more? It's in this world that we live in. it just seems that everyone's so obsessed about themselves. Um,
What you're saying is that in some way consumers are becoming more transactional,
yeah, could be.
but then the whole point of brands and emotions goes out.
Becomes all the more important. It doesn't go out because in this world of consumers becoming less, how do you create that? That's the challenge that we have because we know it's the emotional value that's what makes it stick. They're caring less. How do you get them to care more? How do you create such an interesting story or such a cool experience, right? What is it that stands out today? You've got to be different. You've got to have that pull factor. You've got to create a story or create some unique magic. That's what I'm saying. If there's a world in which consumers don't give a crap, and therefore the task is that much more for marketers and branders.
And with that, this podcast just became eligible for an E explicit tag. That's okay. That's okay. Is there any one brand, Lulu, you wish Landor had helped transform, and what would you have done differently for it?
I'm a huge fan of airlines, like you. I just think that, all the elements of branding come to life in a service industry like airlines. I really wish Lando had done Indigo when it was first launched. Such a beautiful case study of a brand that stood for something, that something was then operationalized. They had a distinctive visual language, a verbal language. They paid attention to brand voice. They invested in the on brand customer experience. They did all of that. Um, what would I have done differently? Perhaps nothing initially, but that brand hasn't been touched for so long, and that's a missed opportunity. I think it's a bit tired. It should have been refreshed 5 to 7 years ago, right? It's a dynamic brand. It's grown beyond its original, safe, on time promise. And maybe the advertising has evolved, but fundamentally the brand identity of Indigo hasn't evolved. And today I think the entire space is dynamic. Consumers and travelers, their expectations are so different, right? Digital design, all of that customer experience. Indigo has such a fabulous opportunity. I wish they would not be so old world and conservative and step up the game and really differentiate themselves. That's one I would love to get my hands around.
And I'm sure you'd know this, but they are now world's number two in terms of market cap for airlines. So they are doing some really really great things as far as business side is concerned. On the brand, yeah, I mean, they have insourced a lot of stuff. You would probably know that,
Which
but
is all fine, Vishal.
yeah,
But the thing
but
is, like a brand that's fading catches up with you eventually. A lot of businesses say, "Oh, our business is doing really well." But we've seen this through our BAV studies when if the brand starts to fade in differentiation or relevance, it's going to catch up with the business. And if you look at LinkedIn, any Indigo post, you just see the negativity, the negative sentiment that is out there. I think I'm not saying that a superficial brand refresh will solve that, but I do think they have a chance to reinvent the entire brand experience for Indigo, which they haven't done in a long time. It's the same experience that they started with, whether it's, I can't remember, 2007 or 8.
is there a book or a podcast that's shaping your thinking right now?
I'm always reading. I'm reading, fiction right now, so probably not as interesting. But podcast, um, there's a fantastic podcast called Awesome at Your Job, which is really, really useful. And every time, there's something which I find extremely interesting there. I also like Rishtad Tobaccowala's The Rethinking Work Show, which I think is fantastic. He's a real legend in our industry. He has a newsletter uh, on how um, the future is not. something about the past. You can't look to the past to tell the future. But fantastic thinking and work. I've learned so much from his writing and podcasts. I'm a huge fan. I also follow Dr. Rangan Chatterjee. He's a GP in the UK. He has this health podcast called Feel Better, Live More that is a lot about, just tiny hacks for health. But each time it's a 1 hour in-depth interview. And then closer home, Deepak Jairaman, a friend of mine, runs Play to Potential, a podcast, fantastic lineup of some of the best thinkers around the world, and a lot of, cool topics for transforming yourself. So these are all some of the things. And most recently, I'm actually hearing Devika Bulchandani on a podcast where she's talking about her journey, and it's just super fascinating.
I'm gonna put links to all those in the show notes.
I'll send
It's
it to you.
easier
Yeah.
for listeners. Um, you're a vocal advocate for women in leadership. What specific initiatives at Landor are you most proud of in nurturing diverse talent, Lulu?
We have something called Build to Belong around the world, which is a employee community where whoever wants to be part of this can come together. And we talk about the challenges. We organize sessions. We bring inspiring speakers. We think about interventions to company policies, etc. So it's a group that fosters inclusivity and belonging. So that's something that we have. Also, WPP has a fantastic program called WPP Stella. And in 2018, along with several other agency leaders, I co-founded WPP Stella in India. And today we have over 350 women, high potential women across WPP companies in India who've had the benefit of structured mentorship for a year. And I'm a mentor for, ever since 2018, so 7 years running. I've had one or two mentees every year. That's a program that's truly created tremendous value. And then we also have the Next Gen internship program. Globally, we have Springboard in India, and both those programs are emphasis on hiring more women and more diverse employees is there. So I'm very proud of all of these initiatives, and we have some fantastic statistics at Landor. More than 55% of senior leaders are women, and more than 51% of the workforce is female. So I think we're doing well on equal representation.
That's very heartening to know. And I just want to thank you now for this rich, enlightening conversation. I'm so glad, and thank you. Thank you for being so kind and generous with your time.
Not at all. I really enjoyed it. I must say, I appreciate your thoroughness and preparedness through the homework and the questions. You really went beyond the traditional sources. So I appreciate that. I enjoyed the conversation. I definitely appreciate the connect. We'll keep in touch. When I come to Delhi next, let's definitely meet up for a coffee.
What a chat. One of my all time favorites, primarily due to how giving and generous Lulu was in sharing knowledge. Her mantra of going further, faster, while shaping a life that matters is not just the title of a book, it's clearly been her life philosophy. Next Sunday, the Indian AvGeek features the CEO of DigiYatra Foundation, Suresh Khadakbhavi, and we hear from the man himself on the future of this terrific platform and technology. If you've enjoyed this episode, do not forget to hit subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who might enjoy it. The Indian AdGeek streams on all major podcast apps. Lulu is not active on X, and I am at Vishal1 Mehra. Until next time, keep your creative antennas tuned and your AdGeek flag flying high. Stay quirky, stay curious, and keep geeking out.